Welcome to Change Starts Here, a FranklinCovey education podcast for K-12 leaders driving meaningful change through bold thinking, real stories, and proven strategies for lasting impact. Now here are your hosts, Kim Yaris and Eve Miller.
Welcome to Change Starts Here, Research Edition. I'm Eve, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kim. And today we are talking about breaking the cycle of stress, a big topic in the world of education.
Oh my gosh, you are so right, Eve. And I have to say, as someone who has worked in and around education for almost 30 years, this one hits close to home, right? So preparing for this conversation and digging into the research has made me reflect on my own relationship with stress over the years. And that's why we want to spend time today talking about a tool that research shows can actually lighten the load, not eliminate every challenge, but change how you carry them. And that tool is self-compassion. Now, if this idea of self-compassion makes you a little skeptical, we encourage you to stay with us, right? This isn't about pretending everything's fine. Actually, it's really the opposite. It's about naming stress for what it is, treating ourselves with the same care that we would offer a student, and breaking that cycle that leaves us drained year after year.
Yep, that's right. And to that end, here's where we're heading in this episode. First, we're going to set the stage by talking about stress and this term that we're going to introduce called allostatic load, how it shows up in teachers' lives and why it's such a powerful force for evil. Then we'll introduce the science of self-compassion, what it really means, how it's different from just positive thinking or magical thinking, and why it especially matters for educators. And then we'll share research findings, including a major brand new study with over 4,000 educators, and we'll get practical with simple, doable strategies you can just put into practice right away. And then finally, we'll talk about how this practice ripples out to your students and your school culture, and we'll send you off and hopefully have a great day.
By the end, you'll walk away with a lighter load and a clearer sense that you're not alone in this work. Ready to dive in? All right. So, Eve, here was the cycle that I went through for years, just making it to Friday, then Sunday, then dreading Monday. And there's a memory that sticks with me, and I don't quite know why. It was right before the end of the second quarter, January-ish. Report cards were due. I had an observation coming up. It was late. The students had long gone, and I was sitting at my desk just feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. I felt like I couldn't keep up. Like I was failing my students, failing myself. And so here's the thing. What I didn't realize then, but I can see now, is that thought, I'm failing, didn't just come from one bad day that I was having. It came from weeks of feeling behind.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that's such a fitting example. It's not like some huge epic thing happened that day. As you said, like you don't even quite remember why it was that day that stood out to you. It was just noting that feeling of failing. And it's exactly what scientists mean when they talk about this idea of allostatic load. And this is basically, it's like the weight of stress over, and chronic stress in particular, over long periods of time, which is a teacher's experience often, having a lot of stress over a long period of time. So maybe I like to think of it for myself as like carrying a backpack, and each day adds another item. So for a teacher, maybe that's the stack of essays to grade, a tough parenting meeting, a last minute directive from the district that came out of nowhere. One or two of these stress bricks inside of your backpack, okay, you can carry that. But over months and years, the backpack becomes very heavy and you can barely stand up straight. And that's when teachers hit burnout, right? You have not taken those bricks out fast enough for
Mhm.
all the bricks you're putting in. And sometimes it leads to teachers leaving the profession entirely.
Okay, so that analogy is really resonating for me. And what it's making me think of what's even trickier is that so many of us in education buy into this paradigm that tells us be strong, just push through.
Yep.
It's almost like
Mhm.
being tough means ignoring stress altogether. But here's the thing, ignoring it does not protect us. It compounds that weight. It's that backpack with all those bricks in it, right?
Right. Well, and I mean, you're naming it exactly. It's really that accumulation. And we often hear these ideas of teaching is stressful. And even the research year after year that names teaching as the most stressful job, sometimes tied with emergency responders. So
Yeah.
congratulations. Um, but that like we just have to pause because I think it's just we're so used to teachers being this very stressed like group that we are missing like this has real consequences, health problems, feeling less effective in the classroom, and again, leaving the profession altogether. And it's a cycle, and we just have to stop it. Like it just keeps repeating, and we need to talk about real ways to interrupt this cycle.
Wow. So I'm thinking about my educator friends, all the people probably listening out there, and I am guessing that everybody listening has their own version of this
Yeah.
cycle that we're talking
Yes.
about, right? It's like that 1 week in October that feels endless, probably the one right before Halloween. That stack of grading that you log home over Thanksgiving break,
Oh,
that creeping exhaustion by May when you're just holding on till summer vacation. And then you come back fresh, ready, and it all starts again, right?
right.
After the summer break.
Well, and what you were speaking to there, Kim, that is the reality of the allostatic load and the purpose of our conversation here today. So the question is, how do we interrupt it? How do we interrupt this cycle? And how do we shift the way we carry stress so that it doesn't crush us? And that is where that fluffy term that is so powerful comes in, self-compassion. Let's get into it. Let's talk about what can actually interrupt the cycle of stress. One of the most powerful tools that researchers have studied is self-compassion. And before we unpack it, see what I did there? Okay, let's clear up a misconception. It's not about lowering the bar for ourselves or excusing real mistakes or just telling yourself, everything's fine, right?
All right. So I'm just going to hop in here and say, I'm glad that you were saying that because I'll be
Mm,
honest. When I first began thinking about the word self compassion, my teacher brain immediately thought, sounds a little self indulgent, kind of like bubble baths and ignoring my responsibilities for a little
yeah,
bit.
sounds great.
And I think it's really important to say right here, right now, that that is a misconception. Self compassion is actually about facing reality with honesty and kindness.
Yes, well, exactly. And just to jump right into it. So, the creator of this term, self-compassion, um, or the researcher behind the theory that still stands today, decades later, is Dr. Kristen Neff. She has a great TED Talk. Go check it out. Kristen Neff, and a great book. And she describes three parts of self-compassion that are on a continuum. So see how you relate to these. So self-kindness instead of harsh self-judgment. It's a hard one for me. When
Mhm.
things go wrong, talking to yourself, the practice of self-compassion is talking to yourself like you would a student or a loved one who made a mistake, or like as if they were saying those words to themselves. You would be gentle and encouraging and supportive. Sounds silly, but we're going to get into this. Second one, common humanity instead of isolation. In stress, we like to isolate, so many of us. And we also isolate in our brains. We are the only ones who have ever gone through this. We're the only mess up in this school. We're the only teacher who's ever done this terrible thing or like forgotten to do this.
Mm-hmm.
You remember you're not alone. Struggle is part of being human and part of being a teacher, part of any profession.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely, it's going to keep happening in teaching. So changing that script. And then finally, mindful awareness instead of over identification. So however you feel about this idea of mindfulness, ultimately what it is an awareness of yourself, your body, and your experiences. So you notice your emotions and your thoughts without exaggerating them or shoving them down, which is kind of the educator way. So
Mm.
put simply, I like to think acknowledgement, connection, and kindness.
All right. So my brain immediately goes to how would I actually use this? So I'm picturing that moment when my lesson has just bombed and I'm thinking, I am a terrible teacher.
Right, right.
So if I were following these steps, instead of like dumping all over myself, I'd say, that was a bad lesson.
Mhm.
Acknowledgement. It happens to every teacher at some point.
Yep, yep.
Connection to humanity. I feel lousy right now, and that's okay. So, funny thing, right? Like, I can say this right here in this moment, and I just feel how differently those two things feel in my body. Like, I'm a terrible teacher. And you know what? I just had a bad lesson. It's like the energy is completely different for both of these, for these two different responses.
Yeah, well, and I think that you're again, you're getting at the heart of it with your example. And I think self-compassion, let's be so clear because we know this idea toxic positivity comes up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Self-compassion, we're not saying it erases the challenges. It changes your relationship to the challenge. It allows you to go home and not have to carry that backpack as heavy of a backpack. And it turns I like to think about this. It turns the inner critic into a coach, right?
Oh, I
Oh,
love that.
good.
Turns the inner critic into a coach. And
Yeah.
can I tell you how much I love that? I would so much rather hang out with a coach than a critic, right?
Yeah, yeah, fair.
Um, so here's a question for those of you who are listening. When
Mm.
was the last time that you said something to yourself that you would never say to a student? What would it sound like if you offered yourself the same patience and encouragement that you offer a student?
So what Kim is talking about is how she can already feel a difference when she tries these different sides of the self-compassion continuum in her body. But does it actually work? We don't bring you ideas that aren't backed by a lot of research. So let's look at what the data tells us. And as we were preparing for this episode, a new meta-analysis came out. And so we were able to get a preview copy of it, and it is amazing. It looked at over 4,000 teachers from 19 different studies. And here's what it found, just in a nutshell. Teachers with higher self-compassion reported significantly less stress. And the correlation was about, well, this effect size, it was about a minus 0.49, which researchers consider a very significant correlation.
All right. So I just want to say that a different way, right?
Yes,
So what that
please.
is saying is that at the end of my day, if my stress level is like 8 out of 10, practicing self compassion could realistically bring me closer to a 4 or 5 out of 10. Not gone, but lighter. So, maybe I can make dinner without with my family without like collapsing.
Right.
If I'm a,
Yes.
if I'm a
Yeah.
4 or 5 rather than an 8 or 9.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, exactly. I think that's a great way of just like bringing it down to reality is this is a practice that it might feel silly to you at first, but it has very dramatic impacts. So here's an example. The study also found a positive link with job satisfaction, and it was at a 0.32 is what I have written down here. That's a meaningful bump. It means teachers who treat themselves with compassion are more likely to finish the week still connected to why they love their job. That, that's good.
Yeah, well, yeah, let's take a minute and think about that one. Like two teachers can have the same tough week, right? Behavior issues, grading piling up, parents emailing,
Yeah.
and one teacher spends a whole week beating herself up. The other pauses, takes a breath, and says, "This is tough. I'm not alone. I feel stressed. I'm okay."
Mhm. Yep.
So by
Yep.
Friday, the one teacher that's beating themselves up is depleted, whereas the one that's being compassionate towards herself still has some gas left in the tank, right?
Yep. Yeah. Well, and here's what's even more encouraging. Mindfulness programs. So, that idea of reconnecting after a lot of stress, we disconnect in stress from our bodies, right? Like that is a way. So mindfulness reconnects us to what we're experiencing. So those types of programs that connect us to what we're actually feeling, our experiences in our brain and our body, they are just that are designed for teachers, not just for anyone, for teachers specifically, show really big effects. And that's one of the practices, that is the practice of self-compassion, so much of it. So in this meta-analysis, the effect size for self-compassion was about 0.77. And in
Whoa,
research terms, yeah, that's large.
that's
In
big.
real life, it means this shift isn't subtle, right? Like across 19 studies, this is not a subtle shift from this practice. And you'd actually notice it when you do it. So teachers just like our audience here, like in these programs reported calmer reactions, more patience, less emotional exhaustion.
Wow.
So here's my question for you. If self-compassion can lower stress and increase satisfaction, like how may it change the way you show up? Like if you actually imagine being able to like to feel less stressed on a daily basis, how might you show up in your classroom? How might you show up for, your family, your friends?
Oh my gosh. I love that question, right? And listeners, if you are nodding along and want more ideas for practicing self compassion, make sure to grab the handout and staff booster in the show notes and stay with us because we've got 4 quick, simple ways to practice self compassion and ease the weight of stress.
Yes, the power of self-compassion isn't in theory, it's in practice. And it doesn't take hours of meditation or retreat. Small but consistent moments make a real difference.
All right. So the first strategy is one we already mentioned, which is called the self compassion break. How do you
Mhm.
do this? 4 simple steps. Pause and notice a moment of stress. Acknowledge how you're feeling. Connect to our common humanity. Remind yourself others feel this too. Then offer yourself kindness. May I give myself patience? May I take care of myself in this moment? And that's it. 2 minutes tops. And you have interrupted the spiral.
Right. And building on this, another simple tool is this idea of a 30-second reset. We know you don't have a lot of time and very limited time to yourself, right? So between classes, we're saying 30 seconds. Between classes or even, I don't know, mid lesson. Um,
Sometimes.
yeah, yeah. Take
Mhm.
3 slow breaths. Drop your shoulders, unclench your jaw. Notice that you're clenching your jaw. Oh, this is mine. People are like,
Mm.
come on, let go. I'm like, oh my goodness. And just by like being aware that I'm clenching my jaw, whew, it doesn't have to stay. It doesn't have to stay in my body. That feeling of threat, that feeling of stress, whatever caused it. Because some of this, it is a habit now. It is a habit. So this is interrupting it. Does it sound cheesy to be in a lesson and go like, 3 deep breaths. Yes, if you let it sound cheesy, but allow it, try it. I dare you. Like, it makes a huge impact.
I don't think it sounds cheesy. I used to keep a sticky note on
Yeah.
my desk that said, breathe before you react.
No.
Just that reminder helped
Yeah.
me reset instead of snapping at kids when I was already on edge.
Oh, that's yeah, there you go. Create a Post-it
Simple,
note.
right?
Kim Yaris. Just that reminder, I think is really amazing. Here's a big one for me that, by the way, we have done all of these. We tried these, and this is one that, um, in truth, has really changed my life, the way that I treat myself, and that's why we bring it today. So there's also this one that is reframing mistakes. Instead of the "I blew that lesson," try something like, "That didn't land the way I'd hoped, but I can adjust." Right? So that small shift in how we talk to ourselves, from harsh judgment to constructive coaching, right? Critic to coach, changes
I love
how
it.
you can carry the experience into the next class. It is truly that reframing that tells the brain how to interpret it, either as a threat that you're not good enough, or as like, we are learning, we are building. There's totally different signatures in the brain when you do those two things.
I love it because when you're hanging out with your coach and steadier critic, what happens is that you don't dread going into third period after second period just went off the rails, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, no, fair, fair. And if I can, just one last practice that I came across. So it's the check your self-talk. It's, it's pretty similar. So, but it's that idea that you were talking about earlier, Kim. I just want to kind of call it out. It's like, ask yourself, would I say this to a student I care about? Would I say this to a loved one I care about? Because maybe all the students here like, right now. But like, just, it is a good check.
Mm-hmm.
I have made myself say some of this stuff out loud. And I find I'm horrified by the things that I say to myself still after years of learning to do this self compassion practice. So if the answer is no, you must stop. You must rewrite the script. And supportive inner dialogue doesn't make you soft, right? It makes managing stress sustainable.
Yeah,
So,
I hear you, right? So here's our question for you listeners. Which of these feels most doable for you this week? Could you try a compassion break after school? A 30-second reset before the bell? So we want you to pick one and see what shifts, and be sure to let us know how it goes in the chat.
all right. Now we're about to wrap up, but it's important to say that self-compassion, again, we want to emphasize it isn't a magic fix. It doesn't erase the systemic challenges in education. Teachers will still need support with workload, policies, resources,
Mm-hmm.
but self compassion is a tool you can carry with you right now, even when those bigger changes are still in progress.
Yeah. And to that, I want to add it's not just about us as adults. When students see us model self compassion, when we own a mistake and we move forward without beating ourselves up, it creates a classroom culture where mistakes are part of learning. And that's not something to be ashamed of.
Right. Well, and there's research to what you're saying about the way that a teacher, responds to a student, is very related to their own internal dialogue, right? So, and how they show up at home, how they show up with colleagues. So self-compassion shifts that internal tone, the way that we're speaking to ourselves, to one that we, right? Like, because we're practicing that in our heads. That is the tone that we are using. So it's the tone we know. So what else? It's, of course, the thing we practice in our heads is what's going to come out to the world more often. So shifting that shifts our ability to show up more authentically as ourselves, in the world, or more as a person we would like to be.
Yeah, so I keep thinking back to that version of me sitting at my desk in
Mm,
January where I was
yeah.
convinced that I was failing. And what I wish I had known then is that being kind to myself wasn't weakness, right? It was the strength I needed to keep going.
Yeah. What? I think you nailed it there. And I think that's part of the takeaway, right? So stress is real and it accumulates, but it doesn't have to define you. Self-compassion, acknowledging what's hard, remembering you're not alone, and responding with kindness. It does lighten the load. Research evidence a lot. And when the load is lighter, you can stay in this work longer, right? With more joy.
All right. So, listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend or a colleague. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Change Starts Here Research Conversations. Thanks for joining and take care.
FranklinCovey Education is a trusted partner in developing leaders from the classroom to the boardroom in over 8,000 schools in over 70 countries.